Alright, you guys have been asking for quite some time for some sort of tour of our workshop. And today we decided that we were going to show you guys the different styles of power hammers we run here at the workshop.
So we're going to start today's video off with talking about power hammers. This is our 50-pound Little Giant power hammer, or sometimes referred to as a trip hammer. This is the power hammer we've had at the shop the longest. Now, when I say 50-pound power hammer, I mean the actual ram weight. The falling weight of the hammer is 50 pounds. So these power hammers are known as mechanical power hammers. Now what that means is it is actually a clutch driven power hammer. So as you engage the treadle on the bottom of the hammer, a tapered clutch engages the crank on top, which spins a weighted flywheel. As that flywheel spins, the armature and the ram and everything begin to move, and it gives you an amazing control with the treadle and the clutch combination. So Little Giant actually started out as a machine shop in 1891. Then they acquired a foundry in 1894, and in 1896 they began producing this exact hammer. Now from 1896 to 1984 they produced around 50,000 power hammers. The weights went all the way from 25 pounds in the falling weight to 500 pounds. Again, this power hammer is a 50-pound falling weight power hammer. This is a great entry-level power hammer. The size below this is 25 pounds, and then it goes from 100, 250 to 500. Now, when these hammers were first produced, they were set up to run on overhead line shafts. So there would be a shaft running through the ceiling of the shop with a series of pulleys. Off those pulleys would come flat belts. Now, as electric motors became more popular, they were set up to run on electric motors with flat belts. Now these particular hammers, they don't take a whole lot of power to get running. This particular power hammer runs on a 1.5 horsepower single phase engine. So what that means is you don't need three-phase power, it is single phase. So a lot of the hammers in the 100 pounds or below can run on single phase power. You've seen us use this power hammer a lot, specifically on the Lothric Knight sword, where Ilya used it to forge the pipe down to make the handle for the sword. Another great thing about this particular power hammer is it has combination dies. Now what that means is one side of the die is used for drawing, while the other side is used for flattening. The drawing dies give you great tapers, uniform shapes, and obviously the flat side does just that. It makes things flat. Now this particular power hammer actually came off of a dairy farm. When these hammers were first produced, a lot of them weren't used for hot forging. These were used for cold straightening. This one was set up for plow shears. So what it was used for was if the farmer were to hit a rock or something like that when he was plowing the field, he could easily bring it into his shop, reshape and resharpen that shear with this actual hammer.
We'd like to take a second and thank today's sponsor, and that is Brunt.
I don't know about you guys, but it's super important when working in the workshop to not only have a pair of comfortable boots, but a pair that keeps your feet safe when working here in the forge. And Brunt has a bunch of different styles to keep your feet safe in the workshop. Whether it's a sneaker-like construction or a classic work boot, they have it. I myself decided to go with the Marin boot. The lightweight style and the classic look combined to a very nice everyday boot. Now Ilya chose to go with the Perkins. He does a lot more heavy-duty work at the forge, and their heavy-duty construction make a perfect boot for his style of work. One of the great things about Brunt as a company is they cut out the middleman. So you can stop paying so much money for boots and get high quality boots for a very, very affordable price. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below, use the promo code THATWORKS15 to get $15 off your first pair of boots plus free shipping and returns. Do your feet a favor and try Brunt boots out today.
Now that we talked about the 50-pounder, we're going to move on to this next project we have, which is also from the Little Giant company. This is a 100-pound Little Giant. Again, what the 100-pound refers to is the actual falling ram weight of the hammer. Not only can you buy brand new parts for these hammers, but what also makes these unique is each one of them is stamped with a serial number. You can contact Little Giant and they will actually tell you the sales date and where the hammer came from. This particular 100-pound Little Giant is a 1945 power hammer, and it actually came from Detroit, Michigan, and was used in the automotive industry. Now this particular power hammer may look like a basket case to a lot of people, but these hammers aren't that bad to work on. So one of the things we had to do to this power hammer was we actually had to pour brand new babbitt. Now what babbitt is was a predecessor to bearings. Babbitt is a lead type material that you heat up and you pour into the journals of the power hammer frame, and the crankshaft actually rides directly on top of that babbitt. Now this hammer endured a lot of wear over the years of its use. Now it's very, very simple to repair these hammers. We're gonna put in a little bit of bronze, a little bit of new parts. We got a crosshead coming, so this hammer should actually be done by the end of the year. Now the differences in sizes is obviously the rams hit harder, but the ratings of the material that you can put underneath the dies actually goes up as the hammers get larger. For instance, the 50 pound is rated for 2.5 inch solid material, and the 100 pounds are rated for 3.5 to 4 inch solid material. So that'll give us a wide range of materials that we can actually forge here in the shop. So it won't be long before you see this power hammer being used in the next series of videos. So that about wraps it up for this style of mechanical hammer. Let's go outside to the other shop and we're going to show you another style of mechanical hammers. So this is what's known as a Bradley upright strap hammer. The Bradley Corporation started out in 1870 in Syracuse, New York. Now these were known as crank actuated power hammers, and this particular version is a strap hammer, which means the ram of the hammer actually sits on straps that moves the ram up and down in between the guides. Now this particular hammer does not have a tapered clutch like the Little Giants that we showed you. This particular hammer actually uses a flat belt and a series of pulleys. As you apply pressure on the treadle, the pulley engages the flat belt and drives the flywheel. This particular Bradley hammer was found in upstate New York, not far from where the company was founded in Syracuse, New York. Now when we bought this power hammer, it was a complete basket case. We had to tear everything down and completely redo the wooden helve, the straps, the bushings in the back above the crank, basically bring it back to life and put it back to factory specs. Now one of the great features of this power hammer is this ultra rare motor mount. Now the motor mounts were often scrapped or just taken apart from the hammer to be never found again. Not only is this hammer a unique weight and size, but this motor mount combination with it makes it a very, very unique piece. Now a lot of power hammers have a unique way that you're able to adjust the ram height for different size materials. On this particular Bradley, you would actually loosen this lever and adjust the ram height just by moving this up or down and then locking it back into place. Another great feature about this power hammer is it has a counterweight on the back of the treadle. Now, as the treadle drops, you'll notice that this wooden brake will actually stop the rotation of the flywheel. Now, the patent dates for this actual hammer were right around the 1870 to 1875 era. Now, this hammer we dated right around 1873 because of this wooden helve and strap design. The wooden helve was actually abandoned for a steel design later in its life. Now those dates may seem rather old when it comes to power hammers, but this next power hammer I'm going to show you is actually a descendant of an old style water wheel power hammer that dates all the way back to the 14th century. Now this hammer is actually again a Bradley power hammer. Hailing from Syracuse, New York, this is also what's known as a crank actuated helve hammer. Because this power hammer came from the Northeast, a very common wood in the Northeast was hard rock maple. That is actually what this entire beam is made out of. In combination with the hard rock maple and the rubber cushions, it gave this hammer a lot of action. Now, as I said, this power hammer descended from power hammers that were designed back in the 14th century. What that means is there was an actual water wheel outside of the shop that would have ran a crank. Now what that crank would have done was lifted up and dropped the helve. This hammer acts the same way. As the crank and flywheel spin, you engage the treadle, which engages the helve and moves it up and down. Now, unlike the previous Bradley, this power hammer is almost ready to go. It takes very, very little to get this style hammer running. It's just a matter of fabricating a motor stand, hooking a belt up, putting a little oil and grease in all the right spots, and we'll be ready to go. This also has a counterweight with a wooden pad brake system that would engage the flywheel and stop the rotation of the hammer. As I said, both of these hammers were made by the exact same company at almost the exact same time, but if you notice the footprint difference, this hammer is about 6 feet long, whereas that hammer is only about 4 feet long. But they actually weigh about the same, 3,250 pounds. Another unique feature about both of these hammers are the use of these rubber cushions. Now what these rubber cushions would do would act as a shock absorber as the ram came down to hit the either hot or cold steel. It would act as a shock absorber in the back of the helve. A lot of times when you find these power hammers, over the years the rubber would start to deteriorate. Now this is a bad example of what a rubber would look like. This is an okay example. It's still usable, but it's starting to age, and this is a brand new example. Now a lot of times when you find these hammers, you have to make a decision whether or not these rubber cushions need to be replaced. They're not that bad of a job to change out. However, locating the exact cushion that came from your hammer may be problematic. Just do a little searching and you might be able to track down the exact rubber. Another unusual operation that we found during our research of these power hammers was the use of these hammers in the process of cold forging. Now what cold forging means is exactly how it sounds. They wouldn't introduce heat into the metal because the cold forging process would actually allow the steel to retain its physical properties. These particular dies look like they were set up to make a series of lock mechanisms. Now, as I said, this power hammer, being a descendant of power hammers that were previously seen in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, it's going to make it great for a lot of the historical builds that we're going to be doing here on the channel. We're going to replace these dies with some little different dies for maybe some sword making or some Damascus making, but this hammer is going to be a great historical representation of power hammers that were used back in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. Now, a lot of people may question the efficiency of these older mechanical power hammers. However, these hammers were built to last. They have soul, they have an ambiance to them. There's just something to these old mechanical power hammers that I've really come to love. Now let's head back into the shop and Ilya is going to explain a lot more modern power hammer to you.
Hello and welcome to the Adidarms section on That Works. And now let's look at the self-contained pneumatic power hammer. The self-contained pneumatic power hammers come in the first half of the 20th century, and they're incredibly efficient at what they do because of how they work. This is a 165 falling weight pound hammer, meaning that this ram, including the die, weighs 165 pounds or 75 kilograms. Now, here's how it works, and it's not only about the falling weight. The power hammer is driven by a motor that's on the other side of this particular power hammer that drives through the belt of this flywheel. Because the flywheel has a lot of mass once the power hammer starts, the crankshaft that's over here drives the internal piston that compresses air. Because there's a lot of weight behind it, there's a lot of force compressing the air. Behind these are a series of valves that look like cylinders with slot cut into them. And as I operate the power hammer, those valves switch positions, allowing some of the air from here to flow into this chamber. The compressed air in this chamber either lifts up the ram, or upon the hit, it doesn't just drop it. It's the 165 pounds plus the pressure of the air that goes in from this cylinder into this cylinder. And you can do the math. You can calculate how much force this flywheel puts into this cylinder. So it is pressure over surface area. You can calculate the volume inside and look how much power the self-contained power hammer adds to the falling weight of the ram. Because of the specifics of a self-contained power hammer, it operates almost like a very fast hydraulic press. In fact, I prefer power hammers to hydraulic presses specifically for that reason. The advantage of a power hammer is your piece, whatever you're working on, doesn't cool off as fast because the motion is continuous and rapid. In fact, you're creating heat as you're hitting your material instead of losing it. Because the cylinder and the guides for the ram are machined precisely, I'm always hitting 100% perpendicular to the surface area of the bottom die, meaning I can punch holes in my hammers that I make very efficiently. I can make a flat bar and fold it multiple times, as you've seen me using on Damascus, wrought iron, bloomery steel, and so on and so forth. And that's why this specific style of power hammer, and which includes the family of the Nazel, Beche, so on and so forth, is my preferred tool.
Well, that about does it for this video on the different power hammers that we have here at the shop. We hope that you enjoyed this inside look at what makes each one of these machines quite unique. One of our main passions here is bringing these old machines back to life, everything from little giants to these two Bradleys that you saw here today. We also want to take a second and once again thank today's sponsor, Brunt Boots. If you guys are in need of some really nice, durable boots, click the link in the description below. Don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and tell us in the comments below if you'd like to see more featured tool videos just like this one.